I feel like I'm parroting myself here, and probably because I am, but the Fate series has seen a lot of growth since the visual novel Fate Stay Night was released in Japan almost 20 years ago at the time of this review. The visual novel, which was about historical and mythical figures being summoned as servants by people known as masters to fight in the Holy Grail War, a battle royale of sorts where the winner would be granted a wish by the Holy Grail. This series ended up becoming the main source of income for Type Moon, with many spin-off stories, alternate scenarios, adaptation, and of course games, with the gacha game Fate Grand Order, which as of September 2023 has earned $7 billion in revenue. Today's game, Fate Samurai Remnant, is the latest entry in the series, and for transparency, a copy of this game was provided courtesy of the publisher. For context and for full enjoyment of the game, I will endeavour to try and keep this review spoiler free, and as such, the true names of most of the servants will be left out, with the exception of a couple due to how early they appear in the story. Though, if you're familiar with the Fate series, you'll know who most of them are anyway. But for those of you who are not, you don't need to be familiar with the series to enjoy the games, you can jump right in with no knowledge of the series. There will be late game footage, and it will be out of context. Fate Samurai Remnant is an action-adventure game set in Edo, now modern-day Tokyo in Japan, in the year 1651. You play as a young man named Miyamoto Iori, the adopted son of the legendary swordsman Miyamoto Musashi. To avoid confusion, I'll be referring to the two characters by their first names going forward. Iori lives in the district of Asakusa in Edo and makes a living by doing jobs around the city for money while continuing to perfect his swordsmanship. He is often visited by his stepsister Ogasawara Kaya, who was adopted by the Ogasawara family after Musashi had passed away, the famed swordsman being friends with the family. Iori goes off to defeat some thugs who had been causing trouble one day, and after fighting them off, notices a strange bruise on his hand. Not thinking too much of it, he retires for the night and finds himself under attack. As he fends off his attackers, he is then confronted by a mysterious warrior clad in armour, and while Iori puts up a struggle, he is quickly overwhelmed. The warrior's master appears, establishing the warrior's identity as a rider-class servant, and identifies himself as Yui Shosetsu, and before Iori meets his fate, the bruise manifests itself as a command spell, the mark of being a master. This summons Iori's servant, Saber, a young warrior wielding a sword who manages to successfully save Iori from both Yui and Rider, as well as another master, Chimon, and his servant Lancer. Iori then finds himself involved in the Waxing Moon Ritual, an event similar to a Holy Grail War, though with some noticeable differences as you go on. The game will have you travelling to various parts of Edo and its surroundings as Iori and Saber try to put an end to the ritual while trying to limit the amount of casualties. But is this game any good? Find out in The Good. I like the setting of the game, and the historical aspect really appeals to me. The mid-1600s in Japan works, and there was a historical event that actually happened in 1651. Some of the characters in the game are based on real-life characters, and we're about to go into a history lesson, so I'll set a chapter in place so you can skip it if that's not your thing. Miyamoto Iori and Yui Shosetsu were real people, with Yui being the main focus of our lesson. In 1651, there was an event known as the Keian Uprising or the Tosa Conspiracy, and to understand it a little better, we need to go into a couple of other events in a little more detail. Now, remember this guy? Well, he established the Tokugawa shogunate and died, so his family are now calling the shots. Right now, his grandson Tokugawa Iemitsu has just died, and his son Tokugawa Ietsuna was only 10 years old. And while he had power, there were regents in place to help him out until he came of age. Now, the Tokugawa shogunate had made some very important decisions since coming to power nearly 50 years earlier. While Ieyasu's predecessor, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, was originally tolerant with Christianity worship, over time, towards the end of his reign, he was getting more suspicious over its influence, as he believed that instead of the religions coexisting, European missionaries were forcibly converting the country and destroying and sacking shrines and temples. And while trade with Europe was important for the country, some of these Christian practices and actions worried Hideyoshi, so he put a ban on Christianity. This was enforced when the Tokugawa shogunate came to power, and Christians were persecuted and killed for their beliefs, forcing Japanese Christians to practice their faith in secret, which they did for about a couple hundred years. A major event during this persecution was the Shimabara Rebellion, led by Amakusa Shiro Tokusada, who, funny enough, is also a servant in the Fate series. And this plays in the history of some of the characters in the game. This caused the death of an estimated 30,000 people, and because the shogunate had thought that this Christian rebellion was influenced by Portuguese traders, kicked out the Portuguese. This led Japan to be more strict with trading and associating with the Western world, and outside of the Dutch, who even then were restricted to certain parts of Japan for trade, Europe wasn't really welcome, and Japan had entered its locked country or Sakoku period, where it would stay that way for about 200 years. Another thing which contributed to the events of 1651 was the end results of the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600, which ultimately led by the Tokugawa shogunate rising to power. The victorious eastern forces led by Tokugawa Ieyasu stripped a lot of the lands and properties held by the daimyos or lords of the western forces. This led to a lot of samurai losing their jobs and becoming ronins. Without a master to serve, and after 1615 when the land was in relative peace, there wasn't really any need to have any samurai around, so some became farmers or integrated into towns and cities, but a lot tried to earn their way doing jobs, whether it be as bodyguards and mercenaries, or even turned to crime such as banditry and thuggery, which started to give ronins a bad name. Fast forward to 1651, and a bunch of ronin had hatched a plan to set a bunch of fires around Edo, and while authorities were distracted by the fires, they would storm the castle and either execute or capture key officials, notably the shogun. Yui Shosetsu played a key part in this plan as one of the masterminds, and was tasked with taking one of the other castles key to the Tokugawa shogunate. Miyamoto Iori historically was a vassal for the Ogasawara family alongside Miyamoto Musashi, and both served during the Shimabara Rebellion, though in this game Iori looks a lot younger than he should historically be, and given the Fate series' penchant with timelines, and this game being an excellent example of it with its portrayal of Miyamoto Musashi, it's clear to say that things may have happened differently. With the history lesson out of the way, some of the characters in the game are influenced by some of the events we've just gone over, and admittedly the Sakoku period isn't one I'm generally knowledgeable in, but the added context does certainly make the backgrounds and actions of the characters make more sense. There's lots of activities to do while wandering around in Edo, and it kept me reasonably entertained. Most of the areas you visit have little jobs that you can do, whether it's fighting certain enemies, a named villain, right down to petting cats and dogs. The latter can also give you a minor health boost, and there are a lot of cats and dogs to pet. As Iori and Saber wander around, they can also pick up items that they can sell for money or use to upgrade Iori's magical workshop, which doubles as his home. Iori can also choose to perform sword maintenance to gain an experience boost for his next few battles, or make wood carvings of deities for experience and money. The game also has a number of digressions that Iori can involve himself with. A side result of the Waxing Moon ritual is that while servants were summoned and assigned to a master, a number of rogue servants were also summoned as well. While these servants are not at full power as they have to rely on magical energy through ley lines instead of a master, they are still formidable in their own right. Iori can befriend these rogue servants and can call upon their aid in battle, or in Ryder's case, she'll provide Iori with a buff since she does not actively participate in battle. Sometimes Saber gets excited over things in Edo, and as Iori you can choose to explain it or talk to Saber about things. Completing these tasks and getting to know the servants can award Iori with skill gems that he can use to enhance his skills as he unlocks them, as well as Saber and the rogue servants. Some skills will only unlock if Iori does certain tasks or unlock the skills of other servants, so it's encouraged to do this. A lot of the side activities and side quests really did pad out the game's story in length, and I enjoyed going out of my way to complete them. I enjoyed the game's story as well as its battle system. The game was supervised by series creator Kanoko Nasu, and for those unfamiliar with Nasu's work, he has a very unique sense of attention to detail as well as story writing and world building. With him supervising and some of the scenario writers having previously worked on other Fate material, no doubt you'll get a lot of information on the world and characters. The game does have multiple endings, and there is a point in the game where Iori has to make a choice which will lock him into one of two endings. After you've completed the game and replay it through New Game Plus, there's another choice Iori and Saber can make for a third ending, and there's a gag ending you can obtain by completing a certain digression with a certain servant. I found the story pretty involved, and it kept me interested in seeing what would happen next. The game's battle system is very similar to a Muso or Warriors game, which comes as no surprise given that the developer is Omega Force, who are masters of that craft, as well as the developers behind the Muso games. Iori and Saber, as well as a rogue servant if you have one helping you, are often put into positions where they have to fight a large number of enemies as well as stronger mini-boss type enemies and, of course, boss enemies in the form of other servants and their masters, as well as plot-related enemies. The mini-boss enemies and servant enemies often have a shield or a shell bar which needs to be depleted first, and once emptied they'll start taking more damage. Bosses, servants, and in New Game Plus, certain powered up mini-bosses will often replenish the gauge at key points, requiring you to go through this process again. Iori does have access to spells that he can use to support himself or to attack enemies with, and he can also use skills alongside Saber and the rogue servants. These offensive spells and skills can be used to clear groups of enemies and can stun bosses powering up for an attack, or in general so you can work on chipping away at their shell gauge or health. Spells require gems which Iori can make, purchase or pick up from defeated enemies, and skills require the affinity gauge between Iori and the servant to be filled at certain points so you can't use them at will. Thankfully, you can buy food items that can replenish this, or it can be replenished naturally by continually dealing damage. There is a Valor bar which also fills up as well, and when filled, Iori can use a special attack, or if it's been unlocked for a servant, will allow them to use their Noble Phantasm, a powerful move reflected by feats that the servant had performed in life, as well as being a clue to their true identity. Iori also has different sword stances he can use based off Miyamoto Musashi's Book of Five Rings. Each of these stances are favourable in certain conditions, and I feel that they add an extra level of strategy to the gameplay. On top of exploring around Edo, there are also battles where Iori and Saber are involved with capturing ley lines and defeating enemies. These battles often occur if Iori and Saber are travelling to new places and are just as vital as this is a territory capture segment of the game. Iori and Saber must reach their destination within a set number of turns while preventing the enemy from capturing their home base or spirit font. The rogue servants really shine here too, as they have abilities that are integral to helping Iori and Saber out, but they must have the spirit font where the rogue servant is based under their control to make the most of it. While I really did enjoy my time with the game, it isn't without fault, and let's explore what I think wasn't so good in the bad. To be fair, there isn't a lot I have to criticise on the game, and my critiques are based on what I've just talked about. While I enjoyed the battle system, I generally found that a lot of the mini-boss and boss fights got really repetitive and pretty much had the same general idea going for it. Deplete the enemy's shell gauge and then wail on them when it's down and you'll make short work of them. Bosses become even more tedious because they have certain key points where they will recover the shell gauge, and it's always at the same points. For most of the game, a boss will replenish the shell gauge when it's down to half health, and then you can successfully beat them when you deplete it again. Certain bosses may replenish the gauge more than once, but beating them up to deplete the gauge is simple enough to do, and by late game it's become more of a nuisance as it drags out fights a lot longer than they should. Running low on health? No problems, you can enter your inventory mid-fight which will stop the gameplay so you can heal yourself or recover the affinity gauge. By late game you'll have so many food items on your person that it's pretty hard to see yourself losing. The only other issue, and it's very minor to the point I was considering whether I'd include it at all, was that while the story is good, those unfamiliar to the Fate series may find that the narrative-heavy storytelling does drag on a little bit. Thankfully, you can recap on parts of the story in Iori's house, and you can also refresh yourself on the game's mechanics easily enough. I don't have anything else to complain about here, so let's wrap things up with the opinion. Whether you're a veteran to the Fate series and Type Moon, or a newcomer who's only picked up this game knowing nothing of its source material, Fate Samurai Remnant is a really fun game packed with lots of things to do which rewards you for going out of your way to do them, an engaging story, and Muso or Warriors-esque combat which, if you enjoyed the Dynasty/Samurai/Warriors Orochi series, also from Omega Force, you might get some mileage out of it. The game's setting I think was pretty unique since it's not very often you get games based well into the Tokugawa shogunate's rule, and if you had listened to my little history lesson, I hope you enjoyed it, and if you'd learnt something new from it, I'm glad that I decided to talk about it. The only issues I had with the game were minor, and it was just that the battles pretty much followed the same formula, and that the narrative-heavy story may put some people off, but they didn't really affect the overall enjoyment of the game too much, and I would still recommend it. So with that, it's time for my rating. I would give Fate Samurai Remnant this dog out of 10. Just as this is a good doggo, this is a good game. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for the next infinite backlog review. If you enjoyed today's review, feel free to check out some of our other videos and subscribe for more. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram and our Facebook page. Once again, thank you for watching.